All right. Hello, everybody. With any luck, we are now live and just waiting. There's a little lag in my system, so I can't see quite right away that I'm live, but I trust that we are. Welcome, welcome. This is great. I'm glad to see we've got some folks here. We today are going to be talking about approach charts, understanding IFR charts. And this is sort of the heart of instrument flying, and it's challenging. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to understand. There are a lot of details that you have to understand to be able to understand the charts well. The good thing is they have done a lot to simplify charts over the last couple of years. I actually, in getting ready for this video today or this stream today, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? In getting ready for this today, I actually learned a couple of things that they've added to the JEP charts now, to make things easier, and which is good because um, making it easier is good for pilots. But so what are we going to do today? Hopefully today, by the end of this stream, you're going to have a good idea of how to read an approach chart, and I'm gonna try and give you a good foundational knowledge of reading them. And I'm going to show you towards the end. I'll show you how I would brief an approach in 60 seconds if I had to do it. And sometimes you do have to do it that quickly. One of the things I was trying to do. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mike. I go by IslandSimPilot on YouTube. I appreciate everybody coming out. This is a new thing that I started doing this week, and I'm looking forward to doing probably 2 of these a week going forward. And we're just going to cover all sorts of subjects for instrument flight. IFR flight and instrument flying is not easy stuff, and I'm never I'm I'm never ceased or I never cease to be amazed at how well, for the most part, the flight sim community does at flying approaches. I mean, I think a lot of flight simmers are into kind of the airliner, or at least the IFR style of flight, where you're flying, standard instrument departures, you're flying, stars, standard terminal arrival routes and approaches. And this is not easy stuff. I mean, it took me a year to a year and a half to get my instrument rating, with a break for the winter because we don't fly in the winter here where I live. Um, and it's a lot of training. It's a lot of knowledge to understand this stuff, and I'm impressed a lot of the time at the knowledge that people have. But when you really start getting into the details of, especially approach charts, there's so much in here that most people just don't know. And so we will talk about all this stuff. We're going to go through the basics of charts, and we'll go through precision approaches, ILS approaches, approaches with vertical guidance, which are RNAV approaches, generally speaking, and non-precision approaches like localizer and VOR approaches. For those of you who did not, hey, appreciate that, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, Peter, and I appreciate that. So, um, yeah, so we'll get started, and yeah, so let's start with the real basics. So this is the ILS approach or ILS or localizer approach for runway 33 at my home airport in uh in Rome, New York. And I guess I'll give you a real quick overview of what the chart is, and then we'll go we'll go bit by bit what each section means and what you're looking for. So, the title of an instrument approach actually means something. So this one is ILS or localizer runway 33, and what the title is telling you in this particular case is the equipment required to fly the approach. You either need an ILS receiver or a localizer receiver. You can fly it with either of those two. If you see an approach that says, for example, take a quick look at this one. Syracuse, this is an airport near me. You see RNAV GPS Zulu runway 10. The title is RNAV GPS, and so you know you need a GPS unit to fly that approach. And so you actually have some information that you get just from the title. Then what you have up here is what Jeppesen calls the briefing strip. And you're going to have the radio frequencies that you need to use. You're going to have the navigation information that you need to use for the final approach segment of the instrument approach. This section here is called the notes. It's going to give you any pertinent information, any kind of special things you need to understand in order to be able to fly the approach or the missed. Or actually, I'm sorry, this is the missed approach right here. So this gives you all the missed approach information. There's always going to be a block over here that's going to give you what's called an MSA, which is a minimum safe altitude, which is basically an emergency altitude that you can use if you have an issue of some kind. And down here, you're going to have the notes. There's going to be some altitude information, and we'll get into that shortly. And there's going to be any notes that you need for, or that might be relevant to you flying the approach. And then this section here in the middle is an overhead view of the approach. And this is the runway right here. And this is the final approach course. And we'll get into, and you can see it's also got terrain information around here. You can see it's got, some of the higher peaks around the field highlighted. And so it's got terrain information. It's got missed approach information on this part of the approach plate as well. This is a side view of the approach down here. And this, if you look up here, you can see Bolts, Marcy, Jerda. And you look here, you see Bolts, Marcy, Jerda. This is a side view, and it shows you the vertical descent path as you're approaching the runway. This is the localizer portion of the approach. It's an ILS localizer, and I'll explain a little bit more about this once we get into this. But this is the localizer information that you need. And then it gives you, this is some of the lighting information, what kind of lighting you're going to see coming into the airport. And then the missed approach information down here once again. And I will come back to that as we go through this. And then down here are the minimums. And you can see it's got ILS minimums, and you can see it's got localizer minimums, and also circle to land minimums. And we'll talk more about that as we go. So we'll start at the top. As we said earlier, the title of the approach gives you some information. I'm going to try to make this bigger. And by the way, I'm using, this should be big enough. I'm using Jeppesen charts provided by Navigraph. This is the Navigraph app. There is a discount code or a link for a discount for Navigraph charts in the description of the stream. Navigraph is phenomenal. These charts are the charts that I use in real life, and they are phenomenal. And so here we go. So here at the top, you have ATIS. So first things first, you read an approach chart, top to bottom, left to right, just like you read anything else in English, right? So ATIS is your automatic terminal information service, which is your weather. And then it says ASOS when tower is inoperative. So when the tower is closed, you get a different level of weather information, but you get it on this frequency. So when you're approaching the airport and you want to get the weather so you can understand maybe what approach, if you're going to have to use an approach, if the weather is good or bad, this is the radio frequency you tune in, and you listen to the broadcast that gives you the weather. And the radio frequencies left to right are in order in which you use them. So the ATIS information, the weather information right here, is what you need to know to get the weather. And then you call approach control on 127.425. And this R right here means that Syracuse approach has radar. And that is important in certain instances. We'll get into that a little bit more. Griffiths Tower is your next frequency, and that's the 118.1. And then ground is 121.9. And you can see the two, see the star next to the Griffiths Tower and the ground frequencies. And that means those frequencies are available when the tower is in use. When it's not, when the tower is not in use, the CTAF, the tower frequency, becomes the common traffic advisory frequency. So in other words, if I think the tower closes at 9 o'clock, so after 9 o'clock, you would broadcast on the same frequency, but you're only broadcasting your position to other aircraft. You're not talking to the tower. Brief note on ground frequencies. If you're a VATSIM pilot, if you fly on VATSIM, or if you watch, maybe you watch live streams of airports, I do as well. If you ever hear a controller say ground point niner, or ground point 7, ground point 6, whatever the case may be, almost all ground frequencies are 121 point whatever. And it seems like about 80% of them are 121.9. So if you ever hear a controller say ground point niner, what they're telling you is 121.9. Ground point niner is just the quickest way to say it, and that's what they do. Okay, so we come down here. So this is the information you need to actually fly the approach. This right here, Localizer IRME 110.1. So that's the frequency you tune in your nav radio in order to pick up the final approach course. Well, in order to pick up the localizer and glide slope for the ILS. Now, why does it say localizer when it's an ILS or a localizer frequency, or approach rather? It says localizer because if you tune in that frequency, the 110.1, if you have a ILS receiver in your aircraft that gives you glide slope and localizer, it's going to automatically tune the glide slope for you, and then you'll have the localizer and the glide slope. If for whatever reason you only have a localizer receiver in your aircraft, it's only going to give you the localizer, the left right guidance. And if you need any more information about that sort of stuff, we talked about it yesterday. You can go back and watch the video from yesterday, and we talked more about glide slope and localizers and what all that means. I don't know about the 320, Kim. I'm not a big Airbus guy, and so I don't know. I usually click the approach button no matter what, but I don't know if that's the correct way to do it in the Airbus. And you can actually screw yourself up clicking the approach button if you're not supposed to. But we'll get into avionics stuff in future streams. So you tune in the 110.1. Now, what is IRME? If we come down here, you can see ILS DME IRME. So that is the frequency that comes out from the runway and gives you the left right guidance and the vertical guidance for the ILS. The IRME is the Morse code identifier for the transmitter that's transmitting the radio frequency. So in modern avionics, like your G1000, your GTN 750, GTN 650, those types of avionics, they automatically, when you tune a localizer frequency or a VOR frequency for that matter, all radio transmitters have a Morse code signal. And with modern avionics, they will, when you tune the localizer or the VOR frequency, your radio itself will check whether the frequency is online, whether it's working, whether it's correct. Back in the day, before advanced GPS and advanced avionics, you had to tune the frequency and then listen to the frequency broadcast via your radio and listen for the Morse code identifier to make sure that the frequency you're tuned to is actually broadcasting. That's something that's sort of a lost art nowadays because you most of the time don't have to do it. And then here's your final approach course, which is 327. This is runway 33. Runways are given numbers. It's obviously not runway 327. It's runway 33. And the the Earth's magnetic north is actually moves. So over the course of 10, 15 years, it'll move far enough that you may have to actually change runway numbers, which is kind of interesting. This 2,500 foot altitude right here for Marcy, that's the waypoint or the fix. This is the glide slope intercept altitude. So that's what this is, glide slope intercept. And the 2,500 is above ground level, so it's what you would actually see in your altimeter. The 2002 in parentheses tells you how high above the ground you are. And we'll put this together here in a second. This ILSDA is your decision height on the ILS approach, and this is always going to show you this. So there's multiple minimums for this approach. This section is always going to show you the lowest minimum for this approach, which is 784 feet. MSL, mean sea level, which is what you're going to see again in your altimeter, but it's 286 feet above the ground. So for example, here you can see 2,500 feet is 2,002 feet above the ground. And right here, you're going to see your airport elevation, which is 504 feet. TDZE stands for touchdown zone elevation. In this case, it's only 6 feet different. If you're at a larger airport or an airport with some terrain, there might be a larger difference between the official airport elevation and where the elevation of the touchdown zone of the runway that you're landing on. But if you look, touchdown zone elevation 498 plus 2,002 above ground level gives us this 2,500 feet here at Marcy. So this just gives you the real quick information that you need for the approach. This over here is what's called a minimum safe altitude. And this one's actually a little bit different than they usually are. Let me show you this one right here. This is going to be a little bit. So this is MSA Syracuse VOR. So here's the Syracuse VOR. And what this tells you is what is the minimum safe altitude you have to maintain to be clear of obstacles within normally 25 to 30 nautical miles of whatever fix or VOR or whatever they have listed here. So what this means is, let's say we're coming inbound on a heading of 270. So we're coming in, actually we'd be coming in this way. We'd be coming in from this, grabbed it, from this direction. If you're coming in from that direction, let's say you're flying a twin engine airplane, you have a single engine failure, or you're in a single engine airplane, you have maybe reduced power for some reason. What this is telling you is that within 30 nautical miles of this VOR, you are safe at or above 2,800 feet. That's why it's called the minimum safe altitude. So it's basically an altitude that you can use if you have an emergency of some kind, what you can rely on to make sure you're not going to hit anything. You may be in the clouds. You may not be able to see the ground. And this just gives you an idea of basically when you start getting nervous, right? Because if you maintain 2,800 feet or above, you're safe. So that's called a minimum safe altitude. And you'll always see that on every chart that you look at. So then next up is the missed approach. And this is they give you a script, a written version of the missed approach. And this one in particular, we'll look at the missed approach down here on the overhead as well. So it says climb to 1,600 feet and then a climbing left turn to 4,000 on a heading of 305. And on the Syracuse VOR radial 073 to Miffy D19.4 Syracuse and hold. Okay, so there's a lot in there. I have flown this missed approach. This missed approach takes forever, especially in a Cherokee, because it's much longer, further distance away from the airport than you often get with a missed approach. But so basically, what you do, you climb to 1,600 feet. So your touchdown zone elevate. Let's say you go missed at the decision altitude. Let's say 300 feet we go missed. So you climb to 1,600 feet, and you climb on runway heading to 1,600 feet. So you climb from 300 to 16, no turns, just straight ahead. And then you take a left turn to 4,000 on a heading of 305. And then what you do is on the Syracuse VOR radial 073. Now, this is the fun stuff. So the Syracuse VOR is down here in the lower left-hand corner. I'm not sure. Can you see my cursor? I don't think you can. Or maybe you can. Can you see my cursor on the screen? I hope so. So the Syracuse VOR is down here. And let's say it's right in this corner. Yeah, you can see it. So it's right in this corner. So it says Syracuse radial. You can see it right here. Syracuse radial 073. The way to remember what a radial is a radial radiates out. In other words, if this is the Syracuse VOR, if you go on a heading of 073 away from the VOR, that's the 073 degree radial. So if you can't identify this waypoint with GPS, then you would have to do it using the VOR, which is kind of an old school way to do it. But you would fly on the Syracuse 073 degree radial. So you would actually be flying the opposite direction, 073, 180 degrees, 253. You'd be flying 253 degrees until you hit 19.4 nautical miles from the Syracuse VOR, and then you would go into a holding pattern. We'll talk about holding patterns later. This it may actually not be ideal to explain this missed approach because it's kind of tricky, but the point is they give you the missed approach information right here, and then the dotted line on the chart is the missed approach. So you can see it down here on the overhead view. It's the missed approach, and you can see why they have you climb straight ahead and then turn left, because the terrain starts getting a bit higher out here to the north and northwest of the airport. So next up is this section right here. Now this section is kind of interesting. So this is an ILS or localizer approach. It says RNP approach GPS. Well, I told you before that the title of the approach tells you what equipment you need to fly the approach. And this says ILS or localizer. So that's what you need to fly the approach. So why does it say RNP approach GPS? You can fly the approach with GPS until the final approach fix, which is Marcy. And that's Marcy right here. This is Marcy right here. So in other words, you can fly GPS to Bolts, which is the initial approach fix. We'll get to that in a second. And then fly using GPS from Bolts to Marcy. But once you get to the final approach fix, you have to switch to either localizer or ILS to fly the final approach segment of the approach. So that's what that is there for. Now, here's another kind of curious thing. You see here transition level, flight level 180, transition altitude 1,800 feet. So in the United States, and I don't know, maybe this is just the American in me, but in the United States, the transition level and the transition altitude are always 18,000 feet. Always, no matter where you are in the United States, transition level and transition altitude are 18,000 feet. Now, the transition level is so 18,000 feet and above is Class A airspace, Class Alpha airspace. Transition level is for landing. When you're approaching the airport, you're descending from, let's say you're descending from flight level 350, you're at altimeter setting of 299 or QNH 1013, depending on which system you're using. when you descend through flight level 180, you switch from the standard altimeter setting of 299 to whatever the local altimeter setting is. And when you're departing an airport, when you're climbing through 18,000 feet, the same thing, right? A lot of airports in different parts of the world. Let me find one actually. I'll show you real quick. A lot of airports in the world, or a lot of countries in the world, they do not have the same transition altitude and transition level, and I still can't figure out why. I've had this explained to me. I still can't figure out why. It doesn't make any sense. But this is the VOR Zulu approach into Princess Juliana Airport in St. Martin in the Caribbean. You can see transition level, flight level 650, 6,500 feet for the rest of us. And transition altitude is 5,000 feet. So those two things are different. So when you're landing, when you're approaching Princess Juliana, you would change from 1013 down here to whatever the local altimeter setting is. As you descend through flight level 650, 6,500 feet, as you're departing Princess Juliana, you would change from the local altimeter setting to the standard altimeter setting of 1013 as you climb through 5,000 feet. I don't understand why they do it that way. I've had it explained to me. I still don't get it. But anyway, that's what the transition level and the transition altitude are for. The way I remember it is level is for landing. And then right down here, you have a notes section. This could be anything. And in this particular case, runway 33, helicopter visibility reduction below 3/4 statute miles not authorized. I don't even know what that means. I don't fly helicopters. No clue. So it's not relevant to me. I don't know. I guess helicopters use the same charts, but in any event, that's a completely irrelevant note. This one, on the other hand, is good to know. So if the tower is closed, so let's say you're making an approach at night, or you're making an approach in low visibility, and you want to get the runway lights to come up, pilot controlled lighting on 118.1. That's also the tower frequency and also the CTAF frequency when the tower is closed. And it's so if I remember correctly, so what you do, you would tune your radio to 118.1. If you click your radio 3 times, click, 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 you'll get low lights. If you click it 5 times, you'll get medium lights. And if you click it 7 times, you will get the bright lights. And I'm thinking of of a polite way to put this. My instructor told me to click the crap out of it. He said, "If don't sit there counting 1, 2, 3, 4." He said, "If you need the lights and you're using the pilot controlled lighting, click the crap out of it. You want," and so he used a different word, but anyway. So that's the notes section. It could be anything. I'm gonna look here at Syracuse and see what the notes are for Syracuse. Yeah, so you can see something like this, like DME or radar required, for example, and that's just something else you might need for the approach. Yes, my instructor was the cool thing about my first instructor, I can still hear his voice. It was 15 years ago. I can still hear his voice in my ear telling me this stuff. So again, we'll just zoom out here just for a quick second so you can see the full chart. So we just went through all this up here. It took longer than I thought I would. So maybe this is going to be the majority of our time is just going to be looking at one chart. But the point is to get a good idea, good basic idea of the charts. So if you're looking at the overhead view, this right here is Bolt's intersection, and you can see it says IF, IAF. So the start of an approach is the initial approach fix, which is the IAF. And if you are cleared, if let's say you're south of the airport here and you're inbound to the airport, you're heading generally in this direction. If they tell you you're cleared for the approach at Bolts, and this is the initial approach fix, that's where you go, and then you start the approach at Bolts. we saw above in the briefing strip, the frequency is 110.1, final approach course is 327, and that information is right here again. This also tells you it's an ILS DME, so you're going to get DME stands for distance measuring equipment. Of all the things that the FAA used a reasonable acronym for, that's one of them. So the DME is literally it measures your distance from a radio beacon in nautical miles, from whatever that is. So in other words, you can see right here, ILS DME IRME. So right down here below bolts, how do you identify bolts? I told you before, you can fly to bolts and from bolts to Marcy using GPS. If you don't have GPS, how would you identify bolts intersection? The way you would identify it is you would put in the 110.1 frequency. You don't actually have to tune the 327 for the ILS, the inbound course. It only broadcasts on one course. It only broadcasts the 327 course, so it doesn't matter what you would have tuned in, like on your OBS. So what you would do is you would fly to D14.7 IRME, which is 14.7 nautical miles from this radio beacon right here. And once your localizer needle, your left-right needle on your OBS centers, that means you're right on this 327 inbound course. And when your DME says 14.7, you are at bolts. And then you would continue on to Marcy, and you can see Marcy is D8.3 IRME. So this information down here is a little bit, yeah, I'll go into it a little. So this, I told you before about the minimum safe altitude, right? Well, this has, Griffiths Airfield in Rome, New York has a terminal aerodrome area, which is sort of obsolete nowadays. There's not many of those. I think there's 5 of them in the country. But basically what it is there are several radar facilities that service the area where this airport is. And so you're basically always within radar coverage in a terminal aerodrome area. So it says TAA 30 nautical miles from the initial approach fix, right? So the initial approach fix is bolts. And again, this is your minimum safe altitude information. So you can see right down here, there's the semicircle at the top, 5,200 feet, 3,500 feet, and there's some headings here. These headings are inbound bearings to the initial approach fix, which is bolts. So if you are on an inbound bearing to bolts of, let's say, 270, which you'd be going, or let's say 180. So you're basically going southbound to bolts. Between 4 nautical miles and 30 nautical miles from bolts, you would have a minimum safe altitude of 5,200 feet, which is pretty high. But you can see up here, there's some terrain. That's why it's kind of high. Within 4 nautical miles of bolts, your minimum safe altitude comes down to 3,500 feet. This is an unusual example of minimum safe altitudes, but I just didn't want to leave this on the chart and not explain anything about it. Hey, Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, the frequency, exactly. I'm sorry. The frequency for Syracuse is 117.0. I should have mentioned that earlier. And the same information is true for roughly speaking southbound. So it's exactly the same coming from the south towards the north. 5,200 feet when you're in this area, 4 to 30 nautical miles. 3,500 feet as you get closer to the airport or closer to bolts. Um, Again, it's a little unusual for a minimum safe altitude, but that's what it is on this particular approach. So, what else can we get from the overhead? So again, you've got terrain, and that's in color. Anything specific? I think these hills have to be at least 500 feet higher than the surrounding terrain before they're listed as an individual peak. So you can see this one's 2035, and they're particularly concerned about that because that's kind of high for where it is. And you can see the other different peaks around, just so you know where they are as you're coming in. And some of them are close enough to the extended center line of the runway, like this one down here, that you might want to be concerned about it. Jirda, we're gonna see its importance as we get down to the profile view, the sideways view here, and that is D 4.3 from IRME, and then this D 2.2. I'll explain that as we get down here as well. But there's a reason these are listed. These by themselves don't really tell you anything until you look down here and you can see what they represent. So I'm going to keep it so you can see the top section up here, and we're going to look at the side view of the approach. So I talked about, you could come, if you're coming into bolts, from the south, coming from the bottom of the screen towards bolts, you can get to bolts, hang a left, and fly the glide slope down to the runway. And you can see here its inbound is 327. You see 327 here. And there's bolts, Marcy, Jirda, D3.2 IRME. I'll tell you what that is here in a second. And then D2.2 IRME. And I'll tell you what that is here in a second. So bolts to Marcy. Again, you can fly to Marcy with GPS. From Marcy on, you have to use the ILS frequency and be on the radio frequency tuned into your ILS and following the needles down. The final approach fix is 2,500 feet at Marcy, and that's where they call this a Maltese cross. This cross right here is glide slope intercept. That's where you intercept the glide slope to begin your final descent to the runway. And the distance is actually not what determines where this location is. The determination is 2,500 feet. So if you've got the local altimeter setting and you're on the 327 inbound course, when you hit 2,500 feet, that's when you begin the descent. Now, why is it 2,500 feet and not a particular distance? The reason is because depending on heat, humidity, that 2,500 feet could be a little bit left or a little bit right of of this 8.3 IRME distance measurement, right? So the 2,500 feet is where the glide slope intercept is. And on the ILS, you would just descend down, and you can see it shows this this cone. It shows a side view of this cone right here, and that's this cone up here. And you would come down on, so this 1,200 feet down here is for the localizer approach. I'll get to that in a second. This D3.2 IRME is for the localizer approach, and I will get, well, it's actually not only for the localizer approach, but the missed approach point on the ILS approach is a decision altitude. In this case, it's the altitude, not the distance, that determines the glide slope intercept. Because let's say it's 95 degrees out, as the hotter air, more humid air is taller than cold air, believe it or not. And so it may only be 100. I don't even know what the distance difference would be. It may be 100 yards one way or the other, but it's the altitude that determines where the glide slope intercept is, not the distance or not the location. So you would fly inbound 327 down to this 784 foot altitude with your needles centered. You know, you got your needles centered on your OBS, and you come down. If you see the runway environment before 784 feet, you go ahead and land. If you don't, then you go missed. So a couple of interesting things. What is this D3.2 IRME? You see this V right here? That is what is called your visual descent point. The visual descent point, if you ever see a V on a profile view like this, that V means if you have the runway environment in sight by the time you reach that V, then you will be able to descend at a normal rate to the runway and make a normal landing without having to, cut power and drop fast. You're just going to be able to make a normal descent to the runway. If you don't see the runway until, and that's the D3.2 distance in your DME. You can also use a GPS distance. If you have GPS, you can use a GPS distance in lieu of the DME distance. So let's say you see let's say you see the visual or the runway at D2.5. You know you're going to have to descend a little bit more rapidly in order to get down to make a landing on the runway. But it's more relevant for the localizer approach, and I'll explain why in a second. Well, let's talk about the localizer approach. So what's the difference? How do you fly the localizer approach versus the ILS approach, and why might you fly the localizer approach as opposed to the ILS approach? Some airplanes back in the day, and it's pretty rare nowadays, would have instead of having a ILS receiver, which gives you localizer and glide slope, they might only have a localizer receiver, so they can only get left-right guidance. They don't equip airplanes that way anymore now, but if you had an airplane from the 1960s and it has original equipment in it, or older equipment, let's say from the 70s or 80s, you might only have a localizer receiver. And so you can only get left-right guidance. You can't fly the ILS, but you can fly the localizer. So what you would do to fly the localizer is basically the same thing. You come here to Marcy, and the glide slope intercept, the final approach fix right here, this Maltese cross is the same for the localizer. But what you would do on the localizer is when you cross Marcy, when you hit that 2,500 feet, you drop down to 1,200 feet, and you can fly 1,200 feet to Jerda, and you measure that by the distance, 4.3. And then after Jerda, you can descend down to the localizer minimums, which are 880 feet. And then you fly along at 327 degrees, 880 feet, until you either see the runway or the runway environment, as they say, or you don't, and you hit this D2.2 IRME, and you have to go missed, and that's what this M is. And you can see down here, this is something that they've added to the JEP charts in the last few years, which I think is really, really helpful. MAP at D2.2 IRME. So that's the missed approach point is D2.2 IRME. It's not always obvious what the missed approach point is on a localizer approach or a VOR approach. And they've added it in plain English down here. I mean, sort of plain English down here. So you can actually read what the missed approach point is. So when you hit the D2.2 on your distance measuring equipment, that's the missed approach point. And this black line down here, this bold black line, represents the runway. So the missed approach point is at the runway threshold. The runway threshold is not the missed approach point, but the missed approach point is at the runway threshold. It's sort of silly, but and the reason that it's D2.2, so if we look up here, you can see that uh, the ILS transmitter is at the end of the runway. See that? This is the runway here. This is the transmitter. And this runway is 12,200 feet long, which is about 2.2 miles. So you can see the transmitter's right here, and then 2.2 miles away is the other end of the runway, which is where the missed approach point is. So what you would do on a localizer approach, the old timers would this is kind of funny. The old timers call it dive and drive. You get to 2,500 feet here at Marcy, and then they would chop the power and just dive for 1,200 feet, level off, fly to Jerda, dive and drive again down to 880 for the localizer, and then fly along. And for the localizer approach, this D3.2 IRME becomes pretty important because that's the visual descent point. You know that any time past this or any distance past this, you're going to have to make a steeper descent angle to the runway to make a landing. And it's just something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is past the visual approach point, you're safe to descend. You're not going to hit anything. That's another important thing to know. So that's what they used to do. The old timers call it dive and drive, and some guys still do it. I prefer, if I were to cross this at 2,500 feet, I would prefer to kind of pull my power back a little bit and kind of gently glide down to, I can actually fly this approach. That's a really good idea. And just sort of gently, if I was on the localizer approach, I wouldn't just drop as fast as I could down to 1,200 feet. I'd kind of gently come down, maybe, and actually this is a really good way of doing it. So this right here, this ground speed in knots and glide slope. So this is a 3-degree glide slope for this approach, which is for the ILS approach, which is a normal glide slope. And this tells you, depending on what your ground speed is in knots, this tells you how many feet per minute you're going to have to descend in order to maintain that 3-degree glide slope. So let's say you're flying a Bonanza and you're at 90 knots and there's no wind. You would want to come down at 478 feet a minute. Now, you're not going to be able to do that precisely. You're probably going to aim for 450 or 500, and that's going to roughly keep you on that glide slope. So you can get an idea. Let's say you normally fly an approach at 90 knots, but you know there's a 20 knot headwind, then you're going to be flying at 70 knots ground speed. And so you're going to need only, 350 to 400 feet a minute descent rate. And that's really important to know because a lot of people don't understand that ground speed is what determines how quickly you need to descend for a landing, whether you're flying an approach or just a visual approach. If you have a stiff headwind, you need a lower vertical speed, or a lower vertical speed. In other words, instead of 500 feet per minute at 90 knots, if you've got a headwind, you've got to come down at a little bit less in order to maintain that glide slope. So what I would do if I were flying the localizer approach, I'd cross at 2,500, and I know that if my ground speed is 90 knots, I have to descend at about 500 feet a minute. So that's exactly what I'd do. I'd descend at about 500 feet a minute, and you would roughly cross Jerda, even on the localizer, you would roughly cross Jerda at about 1,200 feet, which is what you want to do anyway. And if you're in the clouds, if you're in the weather, I don't want to be making, large descents and leveling off and accelerating and decelerating, because your inner ear can start playing tricks with you, and that can be a problem. So the old timers dive and drive. I don't like dive and drive. And as a matter of fact, let me show you one of the newer ways to do it, which makes a heck of a lot more sense. This is the VOR Zulu runway. Do they have it? Yes, they do. This is the VOR Zulu approach into St. Martin. We were looking at this one earlier, and you can see so it's a VOR approach. There is no vertical guidance on a VOR approach, right? It's a non-precision approach. But what the FAA has done, and obviously other other aviation authorities as well, you can see down here it says CDFA. Now, what CDFA stands for is Constant Descent Final Approach. It's exactly what I was just talking about. Rather than dropping down to the next altitude and leveling off, you just come down at a rough angle, rough altitude, rough descent rate to maintain the proper angle to get to the missed approach point. And in this particular case, from De Beer, it's about 2.98 degree descent rate to get to the missed approach point here at D2.0. And the minimums are 500 feet. So if you're going, again, you're going 90 knots, you go roughly 500 feet a minute, that's going to roughly get you to the missed approach point at the right altitude. It's actually a decision. It's technically a minimum descent altitude, but when you get to that 500 feet, you would go missed if you don't see the runway. So this is kind of the newer standard, the CDFA, and I think it's the correct way to fly because it's just a lot safer. All right, so coming back, where are we now? Okay, so now we've looked at the profile view, the side view here. These distances, by the way, are from the threshold of the runway. So this 1.1 or this 1.0 is 1 mile from this point to this point from the threshold of the runway. And these are not cumulative. You add these together. So this is 1.0 and 1.1. So that's what? 2.1. 2.1 plus 2.2 is 4.3. See that? So 1.0, 1.1. If you start at 2.2, you're going to get to 4.3. It gives you an idea. You can, if for whatever reason you don't have, well, actually, no, I'm sorry, because these are distances to the ILS transmitter, this D4.3. So that's the distance to the other end of the runway. These are the distances to the threshold of the runway. So you know that from bolts, it's about 6.4 and 4, 10.4 plus 2. It's about 12 and a half miles from bolts to the threshold of the runway. And that just gives you a way of telling how far from the airport, how far from the runway you are. Now, this right here gives you a quick depiction of, yeah, Mike, you're going to need a beer. This gives you a quick depiction of the lighting that you're going to see as you approach the runway. And you can see MALSR. This is medium intensity approach light system. How did they come up with MALSR for that? I have no idea. But the typical ones that you will see, and what that is the rabbit. You see this vertical string here of dots, right? The medium intensity approach light system is the rabbit. It's the lights that run towards the end of the runway as you're approaching, right? So you can see where the runway is. MALSR is medium intensity. HALSR is high intensity. So high intensity or medium intensity. And that just tells you like how basically how visible it's going to be depending on what the weather is like. If you have a medium intensity approach light system and it's low fog, you're not going to see it as early as you would see a high intensity approach light system, for example. And then this here says PAPI, and that's off to the left. You can see it's to the left of the runway. That's your precision approach path indicator. Those are the 4 white and red lights that you see, which will give you the visual glide path. Now, one thing to note, so you know that you're going to have the rabbit to the end of the runway, that line of lights coming in, and you're going to have a PAPI. You're going to have the 4 lights on the left side of the runway, which will lead you to the touchdown zone. On an ILS approach, you if you break out, let's say you're flying this approach, minimums are 800 feet, give or take, right? 784. Um, let's say you break out of the clouds at 2,000 feet, and it's below 2,000 feet. Weather is good. You can see the pappies clearly. You can then transition to visual and fly the pappies down, the two red, two white. Or you stay on the needles and you fly the needles down from the ILS. I always stay on the needles. I never switch to the pappies on an approach. You can't do both. That's the important thing to know for this is if you try flying the pappy and your needles are off and you try to correct the needles and then the pappy's off, it's because you're not supposed to fly them together. So you either pick the pappy or pick the needles, not both. So I'll leave it at that. And then once again, it's going to give us the missed approach information here just to the right of that. Straight ahead to 1600, left turn to 4000 on a 305-degree heading, Syracuse radial 073, right? So you would actually have to, if you went missed, you would presumably have the 117.0 in the backup frequency of your nav radio, or if you had a second nav radio, you could have it tuned there. When you went missed, you would want to activate that frequency and then turn the dial to the radial 073, which is an inbound heading of 253, and then you would go in, wrong direction. Then you would come out this way in the 305-degree heading until you intercepted that radial that is coming out from the Syracuse VOR, and then fly it over here to Miffy. So they can't give you the full missed approach here because there's one more step, which is the Miffy. But they give you enough of it that you can do. They're going to give you enough of the missed approach information that you can fly it just by looking here. And now that we've seen the missed approach information for the third time, I'm going to tell you this. There is a reason why they put the missed approach information on the chart 3 times. It's because it's really, really important. You have to know when you're flying an approach what the missed approach is, and you have to be ready to fly it. You can't get to the missed approach point and go, oh, geez, don't have the runway. Now what do I do? You've got to have that planned. And I'll actually say this too. This is probably a good time to mention this. Let's say you're coming in from Bolts to Marcy, right? You're coming, normally what they would do is vector, you see 3,500 feet right here for Bolts. Normally they would vector you to Bolts at 3,500 feet. And once you cross Bolts inbound, you come down to 2,500 feet. Let's say you cross Bolts, you start pulling the power. I've had it happen where it's just a windy day. There's a lot of updrafts. It's a hot day. Airplane's not coming down. It's not coming down. You've got 6.4 miles. You can see right here. You got 6.4 miles to get from Bolts to Marcy. You've got to lose 1,000 feet from 3,500 to 2,500 in 6 nautical miles. You got to get down, right? So let's say you're trying to do that and you just can't. The airplane's not coming down. You pull the power. It's not coming down. And you hit Marcy at 2,900 feet. That's a missed approach. You're too high. You're not capturing correctly. You have to go missed. So what do you do? Here's the important thing about missed approaches. The missed approach point on the localizer is down here at the runway threshold. We talked about that a little bit ago, right? And for the ILS approach, the missed is actually the 784 feet. But if I was flying the ILS approach and I couldn't capture at the correct altitude at Marcy, which is 2,500 feet, what do you do? Would you be able to go from Marcy and just say, you know what? I've got Miffy in my GPS database. I'm just going to go straight from Marcy to Miffy. I'm not going to mess with all this. It's a waste of time. You cannot do that. In order to go missed, You have to fly the approach to the missed approach point and then follow the missed approach from the missed approach point. Uh, in this particular case, you'd probably be okay turning left at 3,000 feet direct MIFI, but not always. You may have terrain over here, you may have whatever, and there is no guarantee of obstacle clearance if you do that. The only guarantee you have for obstacle clearance is another way of not hitting anything, which is really good. The only way to be guaranteed obstacle clearance is to fly from Marcy right here to the missed approach point, and you can do it at 3,000 feet. You don't have to descend. Let's say you're at 2,900 feet and you say, you know what, this one's messed up already. I'm not even going to bother trying to descend anymore. You can level off at 3,000 feet and fly to D2.2 at 3,000 feet and then fly straight ahead and make that left turn to 305. You can do that at 3,000 feet. You don't have to descend, but you cannot break off the approach and take a shortcut. That's the important thing to know. So if you're flying a missed approach, you have to fly the missed approach. All right, so that's that, and that's why they put the missed approach information on there 3 times. And I'll do a quick approach briefing here in a second. And I'll show you how I would kind of think about and remember that. So the minimums here, again, we talked about ILS minimums 784 feet, and that's a decision altitude. And again, this number in parentheses right here. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. That's the whole idea. That's the goal. This number in parentheses right here, the 286, is the height above ground level, right? So you would see 784 feet in your altimeter, but you're actually 286 feet above the ground. And the reason is, remember this 498, the touchdown zone elevation? 498 plus 286 is 784. This all makes sense. It's all logical once you kind of get the idea. Now, here's a question. Would I fly this approach to 784 feet? No. I would fly this approach at most to 800 feet because you're not going to have the exact there is no 84 foot marker on your altimeter, number one. It comes down, if you're on a digital display, it comes down in 10-foot increments. I would fly it down to 800 feet and then go missed. The 14 feet or the 16 feet between 800 and 784 is not going to rescue my day. I'm not gonna bother with that. Same thing with the localizer. I would come down to 900 feet after Jurda. I would come down to 900 feet, level off at 900 feet, and fly along and see if I get the missed approach or not. You can see we talked yesterday about aircraft approach categories: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta. Alpha is a final approach speed of 0 to 90 knots. Bravo is 91 to 120. Charlie is 121 to 140, which is where most of your airliners are, like your A320, your 737 are all class Charlie or category C aircraft. And then category D is 141 and above, which you might be flying in a Boeing or an Airbus if you're not using full flaps on the approach. Now, this is somewhat interesting. So full means you've got the full complement of lights, right? So you've got your PAPIs, you've got your approach light system, you've got all the lights. And this is the visibility. This is the flight visibility required, 7/8 of a mile. 7/8 of a statute mile, not a nautical mile. These distances, the 6.4, the 4.0, are nautical miles because when you're covering ground, you have to take into account the curvature of the Earth, and that's what a nautical mile is. It takes into consideration the curvature of the Earth. So these are nautical miles. These are statute miles because it's visibility. It's just straight ahead. You don't need to remember that. I remember all kinds of weird stuff. So 7/8 of a mile. Who determines whether you have 7/8 of a mile? If you're a private pilot flying for yourself, what in the United States we call Part 91, you determine that. Um, the approach controller or the tower controller might tell you visibility is a half mile. Does that mean you can't fly the approach? No, you absolutely can fly the approach because the visibility that he's getting from his weather equipment might be different from the visibility at the end of the runway that you're approaching, right? So it's up to you to determine whether you have 7/8 of a mile. Now, how do you determine whether you have 7/8 of a mile? God only knows. So the approach light system, the lights are spaced a certain distance apart. So if you look at the rabbit, that line of lights going into the runway, I forget if it's maybe 200 feet per light. So I think that's what it is. So a certain number of lights would give you 5,200 feet, which would be a mile. The so, but I mean, are you really going to be counting lights on an approach? No. So, but there is a way to do it. Um, but really, you're just kind of eyeballing it. And then this over here, it says RAIL ALS out. Um, so the RAIL, the runway lights or the approach light system. I forget. I finally found something that I don't remember what it means. I know what it is. I just don't remember what it is or what it specifically means. RAIL is the runway alignment indicator lights. Those are the lights that are in the center of the approach light of the high intensity or medium intensity approach light system. If those lights are out, or if the approach light system entirely is out, you may have a different visibility required for landing. In this particular case, you don't. I kind of wonder why you don't actually, um, but you don't. This is the ILS. So you're going to have lower minimums on the ILS, 784 feet, versus the localizer, which is 880 feet. It's about about 100-foot difference. Because the ILS is just more precise. This is called a non-precision approach for a reason, the localizer approach. You also have higher visibility requirements for a localizer approach or a non-precision approach versus a precision approach. That's why the visibility requirements here are higher. Now, if you notice for the localizer approach, categories A and B, the visibility requirement is 1 statute mile. And for categories C and D, it's 1 1/8 statute mile. Why is it higher for the category C and D aircraft? Because they're flying faster. That's why. So you need to get the, you need to have the, you need more visibility because you're traveling faster. So the circle to land minimums, you don't always have circle to land minimums. Oh, cool. I'm glad you love this stream. I'm loving this stream too. I could do this all day. I could sit here and talk about charts all day long, but I wasn't sure anybody else would want to listen to it. But so circle to land minimums, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, and I've actually flown circle to land at this airport. It says not authorized southwest of runway 1533. This is runway 1533 up here. And so if you fly the circle to land, you have to do it to the north of the field, which now that I'm looking at the terrain doesn't really make any sense, but that's what it says. And these are the minimums for the circle to land, depending on what, again, depending on what category you're flying. So let me see. Yes. So, and why? So, why would you fly a circle to land approach? Okay. For example, this airport. Actually, I can give you a very good reason why you might fly a circle to land approach. The approaches to this airport, there are 3 of them. There used to be more. The FAA is decommissioning VORs, so we're losing approaches. Um, there used to be a VOR 15 approach, which was pretty helpful because if you want to land, let's say the winds are favoring runway 15 and you only have an ILS or a localizer receiver in your airplane, you don't have GPS, you can't fly the RNAV GPS runway 15 approach unless you have an IFR certified GPS. So if you don't have an IFR certified GPS, what do? You're sort of out of luck. What you would do is you could fly the ILS 33, which is to this runway, like we're doing, right? And then once you get, depending on your airspeed, once you get above whatever this MDA, this minimum descent altitude is, let's say you get to 1,200 feet or 1,400 feet and you're a 90 knot aircraft on final, you're at 1,400 feet and you're clear of the clouds. So you're above the MDA of 1120. You're clear of clouds. Clouds are at 1,400 feet. What you can then do, if you're coming in this way, you break off the approach, you turn right, you go around this way, and you make a traffic pattern and turn and come in and land in the opposite direction. That's the only choice you have because you don't have a GPS. This is actually a perfect example of why you might fly a circle to land approach. And I had to fly that exact circle to land on my check ride, and that was fun. I nailed it. So the only other thing I guess I would say, this is a relatively straightforward ILS approach. If you're coming from the upper left of the screen towards the airport, obviously you can't make a 230-degree turn to line up on centerline, right? Yeah, I'm bummed about the no more VORs. I think we're gonna regret that. Trust me, we will regret that decision at some point. What the FAA policy is now is that they want to have at least one ground-based approach within 100 nautical miles of any place you might find yourself in the United States. So in other words, let's say I'm on a cross-country flight and I need an ILS approach because, for example, there's a GPS outage. I need an ILS approach. Well, it might be 99 miles away and I might have 50 miles worth of fuel. Now, I was never planning on going 99 miles away, but I don't have any choice because I'm in instrument conditions, and that's the nearest ground-based approach available. Well, what are you going to do then? You're out of luck, and there will come a day where GPS will go down for whatever reason, and somebody will find themselves in that position, and they will be in trouble. It will happen. Anyway, so you're coming from the upper left towards the airport, towards this approach. You've got to get turned around inbound to start the approach, right? How do you do that? And why does Bolts say IF/IAF? So this right here is a holding pattern, right? And let's look at that holding pattern. So we're coming from this upper left to lower right. You get cleared 2 bolts to enter the hold, 1 turn in the hold, and then you're cleared for the approach. So you would come from this direction, you would cross bolts and enter this holding pattern. Now you can see it's right-hand turns, right? Goes clockwise, the turns. That's a standard hold. Holds are right-hand turns. How do you enter this hold? My beloved teardrop entry. I love teardrop entries. They are so easy, and I will show you how to do it. The reason they're so easy, okay, this is the outbound heading for the hold, 147 degrees. That's the reciprocal of the inbound heading, which is the final approach course of 327. Make sense? All right. So You cross bolts, you subtract 30 degrees from the outbound heading. So 147 minus 30 is 117. So you cross bolts, you fly 117, which is this way, for 4 nautical miles. This is a 4 nautical mile hold. Fly at 4 nautical miles, and then you make a standard rate right-hand turn around until you intercept the inbound 327 to bolts. And once you cross bolts, now you're heading in the right direction to fly the approach. You wouldn't fly the 4 nautical miles. What I would do is I would fly the 117 heading for 60 seconds. Then I would make the turn around. And we'll do a class on holds. Holds are a blast. Everybody gets paranoid about holds. Holds are, once you understand them, and a lot of things with aviation, once you understand the why, the how is a whole lot easier. Kind of a side note. So there are 3 basic ways to enter a hold, right? If you're coming from the lower right-hand corner and you want to hold at bolts, the hold is right here. It's depicted on the chart. This is called a direct entry because you just fly straight in on that 327 degree heading, cross bolts, make a right-hand turn outbound to 147, fly 4 nautical miles, turn back inside 327. You just start going around in circles like that. It's a direct entry. You just fly straight into the hold. Then the other one, there's another one called a parallel entry, where if you're coming, let's say you're coming on a heading of 147 from up here to bolts, you get to bolts and you continue outbound on that 147 degree heading. You're basically parallel the inbound of 327. You fly that. In this particular case, I probably would fly at 4 nautical miles, but you could also do 60 seconds or 60 seconds. And then you make a left-hand turn. Now remember, this is a right-hand turn hold. You would make a left-hand turn. And why would you make a left-hand turn? Because the area within this hold is called protected airspace. What are you protected from? Hitting things. That's what you're protected from. You can see right here, MHA, that's your minimum holding altitude, 3,500 feet. Maximum holding altitude is 6,000 feet. Anywhere in between, you're perfectly fine. The reason I don't like parallel entries, first of all, you parallel the inbound heading, so you're a little bit on the unprotected side of the inbound heading. But this is a right-hand turn hold, and your first turn in the hold is to the left. I'm not that bright, right? I've got a lot going on. You're trying to maintain an altitude. You're getting ready for an approach. You're getting radio calls. You're getting ready to switch frequencies. And I'm going to sit there making a left-hand turn and a right-hand hold. Nah. And it's also a long turn because you've got to turn. I think it's 240 degrees, 240 degrees, I think. You're going to be in that left-hand turn all the way until you turn this way to intercept that 327. It's a long turn. It's not something I like doing. That's why I love teardrop entries. If I was coming from this direction, I would just fly right here, outbound minus 30, 117 degrees for 60 seconds, make a right-hand turn, and in we go. And the whole point for me telling you this is holding pattern entries are not regulatory. In other words, there is no legal requirement to enter a hold in any specific way. The only thing that matters is that you stay within the protected airspace and you get established in the hold. Now, what does it mean to be established in the hold? Basically, to be established in anything in IFR flight, you have to be on the thick black line. So if you do a teardrop entry and you fly outbound, you fly that 117 outbound heading, you are in protected airspace, but you are not on any of these big bold black lines, so you're not established in the hold. You are established in the hold once you intercept the inbound and you're on this nice big black line. Yeah, teardrop versus parallel is up to you. I have never flown a parallel entry on purpose in my life. I think I had to fly it for my check ride. I had to fly a parallel entry, but I will never fly one on purpose. I will always fly teardrop entries. Teardrop entries are easy. And sometimes you'll have what's called a non-standard holding pattern, which is left-hand turn. So it might be down here to the other side. And in that case, a teardrop entry is simply outbound plus 30. So you would fly a 177 degree heading instead of a 117. So we'll do holds at some point. The holds are easier than people make them out to be. There's no reason to be scared about them. The other thing about holds, you are almost never going to be asked to hold somewhere that doesn't have a hold written, right? We've got two holds right here on this chart. You've got this hold right here, and you've got this hold right here at the missed approach fix, right? ATC is not going to tell you hold 180 degrees south of the field at 5 nautical miles at 4,000 feet. They're not going to do that. There's no reason why. So you 9,999 times out of 1,000 out of 10,000, you're going to be flying a depicted hold. It's going to be depicted on the chart. So you know what the holds are going to be. You know you can visualize it. They're not that difficult. So that, I mean, I honestly thought I was going to get through like 5 or 6 charts during this, but that's a basic ILS chart. And I think what I'd like to do now to wrap it up, I'm going to show you how I would brief an approach quickly if I had to. Let's say for whatever reason we're going into Syracuse, which is an airport nearby where I am. This is the ILS Localizer runway 28 to Syracuse. If I had to brief this in a hurry, the things that I want to know 1099, that's the nav frequency. Final approach course 280, that's the final approach course. I need that. Glide slope intercept is 1600. Decision altitude is 613. As long as I know that, I'm going to tune in this frequency. I'm going to bug the heading so I know that the final approach course is 280, and I know that I have to intercept at 1600, and my minimums are, I would call it 650. I'm not going to say 613. If I had time, I would get the weather. If I don't have time, I'm going to ask either approach or tower for the weather. I would ask approach. And then I'm going to read the mist real quick, climb to 1100, climbing right turn to 3000. The rest of it, I don't care. I'll worry about that. It's going to take me a few minutes to get to 3000 feet. I can worry about that later. And I'm going to look at this. I got yelled at for entering this approach or entering this hold one time, and I still think the controller was wrong. But so I'm going to look down here and just see it's a standard straight in ILS, and I can see the runway. I can see the mist is straight ahead, take a right. This is a non-standard hold. And the reason why it's good to know how to enter a hold real quick, real easy. If I have to enter this hold, I can tell you right now, I'm going to cross this VOR, the 117.0 Syracuse VOR at 324 degrees, outbound plus 30, 320, and then I'm going to come around to 114. I've got the hold entry already in my head. Simple. That's what I need. I would take a real quick look at these numbers just to see what they are. I'd look at this. Is there anything interesting? Zimby is glide slope intercept. I don't need any of this because I'm flying an ILS. What are the lights? This is a pretty because there's 3 lines of lights. I know there's a lot of lights, and I know there's a PAPI on the right hand side. Good, that's all I need to know. minimum 613. So I am now good enough that I can at least get started on this approach, and anything else I need to figure out as I'm going, I'll do that. But if you may find you may get switched runways at the last second. You may have them for whatever reason say, GPS is out, we need you to fly the ILS approach, or the glide slope is out, we need you to fly the RNAV, whatever. I want to know, how do I get the final approach course, what glide slope intercept is, what the minimums are, what the mist looks like, what the hold is if I need it. Look at this, pretty straightforward. 613. I want my lights, and I'm done. That's all I need. I could pick this apart and find out, some more information, but if I need to brief it in a hurry, that's what I'm going to do. What circumstances would you be in a hurry? Okay, so yeah, so if, let's say, I mean, it's totally conceivable. You're coming in, this is an ILS approach, but let's say I've got the RNAV approach, the GPS approach loaded, and I'm coming in, and the GPS goes out. Okay, what do I need to do now? I'm going to fly the ILS approach. Or you may have some sort of an emergency. You may lose your electrical system, and your radios are still working. Your radios wouldn't be working, but you may lose your GPS for some reason. GPS systems will go down. They have backup batteries. Let's say you lose your GPS. They have a backup. So the backup batteries for my GTN 750 and my Cherokee, and for the G5, the G5 displays in my Cherokee all have 45-minute battery backups. Do I know they're going to last 45 minutes? No. That's what they're supposed to last. They may last 25, they may last 30, I don't know. Hope I never find out. But if those die and the only thing I have is an old school nav radio and an ILS receiver, then I may have to change. You may not have to do it real quickly, but you might need to so my autopilot wouldn't work if the the glass cockpit stuff went down. So I'd be hand flying and briefing this approach. I'm not going to sit here reading every word on the approach plate if I'm hand flying an IMC. Or you may be low on fuel and you have to divert, something like that. That's another reason why you might have to do that. Hey, Shredding Finn, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Yes, I mean, holds are stressful, but they're simple. So I just break it down. Like I said, teardrop entries. I always fly teardrop entries. This one over here, it's a right-hand turn, outbound -30. Outbound is 100, so I'm going to cross it and go on a heading of 130. That's it. Outbound for 60 seconds, make a standard rate right-hand turn around, intercept the 280. And I'll tell you why I got yelled at, right? We were doing practice approaches into this airport, and this hold, where are we? This is the ILS 28. Where is the ILS 10? I'll show you the ILS 10. ILS 10. We were flying the ILS 10, and we went missed, and it was one of the coolest things in the world because there was a Delta jet holding short for me in a Cherokee. And this is that same hold over here. It says 111 as opposed to 100, but it's the same hold. Or no, it's a different hold, but this is the one I got yelled at for by the controller. So I went missed. You can see the dotted line over here to Stoda and the hold. And he told me to report established in the hold. Now remember what I told you before, you are established when you're on the thick black line, right? So I went missed. I crossed Stoda. I went outbound -30, which is 80 degrees. I went 80 degrees, and I was 15 seconds past Stoda, and the controller came on and said, "I told you to report established in the hold." And I didn't say it because there's traffic, and I'm not established in the hold. I'm not established in the hold until I'm around and inbound on the 291 degree inbound heading to Stoda. I didn't say anything to him. I asked I was with my instructor at the time, my instrument instructor, and I asked him afterwards, and he said, "You were right." But yeah, controllers like to be like that sometimes. But I was right. Um, glass cockpits don't work. So I learned on six packs, and um, I love six packs. I love flying six pack airplanes. The situational awareness you get from like a GTN 650 or 750, even just that is pretty unbelievable. And being able to pull up your charts, being able to have a moving map over top of your chart, it's really pretty in terms of safety. If the key is always you have to know how to use the chart, or you have to know how to use the equipment, right? Because it can be pretty complicated. But the GPS and glass cockpit displays, the situational awareness you get is incredible. It's amazing, because I mean, when I think of 16 years ago when I started flying, we didn't have charts on iPads at all. Like if you had a GPS installed in your airplane, like that was like the most modern thing ever invented, right? Nowadays, everybody's got GPS almost. Do do do. Um, RC Flight Sim Pilot, go get your sport pilot license. Do it. You know what? Flight training is the most intimidating and the most frustrating and the most fun thing you will ever do. And people think it costs a lot of money. It does cost a lot of money, but you don't have to pay 15 grand up front. You don't have to pay 10 grand up front. You pay, lesson by lesson. Do it. Do it. It is so much fun. And you learn so much. And even if you never get to the certificate itself, you're going to have so much fun doing it, and you're going to learn a lot. um I always tell people, like, people always say, like, oh, how fast did you solo, how fast did you get your license, how fast did you, doesn't matter how fast you do everything. What matters is that you have fun, that you learn, and that you learn to be safe, and you start hanging out with other pilots at the airport, and it's a great time. Do it. If you ever have any questions or anything, shoot me an email. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Loran was amazing. My first instructor said that Loran was the best navigation system ever. Let me see. Any other questions? Does anybody have any questions I might be able to answer? I literally thought I was going to get through like 5 charts in this lesson. I got through 1, which I think it worked out pretty well in terms of what we covered. So any questions anybody has? Luis, man, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate the support as always. Um, I am absolutely going to do so. What I didn't mention this. All right, maybe I did mention this earlier. I want, my goal is to do 2 of these a week. I did one yesterday. I did one today. My goal is to do Wednesday, Thursday, and is today Thursday? I don't even know. Yeah, today's Thursday. This tells you how much I pay attention. So my goal is going forward to do Wednesday and Thursday. Do one class each week. We can do holds. We can do en route stuff. We can do departures, arrivals. We can do, and this was a precision approach, the ILS, and a non-precision approach, the localizer. But we can do VOR approaches. We can do all kinds of stuff. There's so much to talk about, and as you can tell, I never run out of air when it comes to talking about flying. I love talking about flying. One thing I'll mention, if you do want to help support the channel in doing this, there is a link for Patreon in the description of the video. So that's there in case anybody wants to contribute to that. That'd be fantastic. But my intention is to do this twice a week going forward, and I've wanted to do this for a long time, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the video yesterday, or the stream yesterday. So I actually got the FAA instrument ground instructor. I think it's a certificate. Uh, it's either a certificate or a rating. I can't remember which, but I got the FAA instrument ground instructor certificate solely for the purpose of doing this for flight sim, fellow flight sim pilots, because there's so much to it and there's a lot to learn, right? And I feel like I know a good amount about instrument flying from being an instrument pilot, but I wanted the teaching certificate in order to really validate the fact that I'm not just making this stuff up, and that I have a knowledge base and a background to be able to share this. And I don't know the answer to every question. I don't know what every symbol means, and I will be stumped here and there on things. But like a lot of stuff came back to me from preparing for this stream today. So it's great for me too to learn. As they say, if you want to understand something, teach it. And so this is a lot of fun for me, and I'm glad it's fun for you guys as well. Um, the approach today in practice. I mean, I got nothing else to do. Do you guys want to sit around and watch me fly an approach? Because I can do it. Yeah, I can do it. If you get Peter, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. All right, let me. I got nothing else to do. I'll fly it. Let me load Microsoft Flight Simulator. Let me set up my Bravo. And what we're going to do, we're going to fly this ILS approach right here. And we're going to put in some nasty weather and we're going to have ourselves a good time. So, let me see here. Oh, I don't know if it's going to. OBS might not capture Microsoft Flight Simulator because I didn't start it before I started OBS. That's the only thing that might hold us up here. In which case, I might have to come back. Let me see. Is there an update for the sim? It's syncing data. It usually only does that when there's an update. Yeah, and that's a really good idea. I should plan to make sure that I fly the approach that we talk about. So now you're gonna find out whether I really know what I'm talking about or not. Yes, cool. Okay, it captured. So, all right, let's fly the approach. So what we're gonna do, and this is my home airport, by the way. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take off, and let me see here. We'll take off from the runway, and we're gonna do. We'll come around out here. We'll come southbound over here, and then we'll make a left-hand turn. Right hand. Make a left-hand turn. We'll capture bolts, or we'll cross bolts for the initial approach fix, and then we'll make the descent down to the runway. And you're gonna see whether I can do it or not. I'm gonna do it in the Cherokee. Hopefully I have that plane loaded. So if I don't have that plane loaded, I'll find one I can fly it in. This is gonna be cool. All right, so what? So Flight Sim is loading very slowly. The Carenado made an Archer for Prepared, and it was like the most boring airplane I've ever flown in my life. Which, I mean, normally is fine. Why is Microsoft Flight Simulator taking forever to load? It says authentication in progress. Oh, here we go. I don't know. Was there an update to the sim today? Anybody know? I sort of feel like oh, was it maybe the oh, tell me it's not a ARAC update. Because if it is, then my nav database is going to be out. It doesn't seem to be. Okay. So we should be good. So now what we're going to do, we're going to see if I'm not sure if I'm your favorite content creator, but we're going to see if I can fly an ILS approach in weather for real. As a friend of mine would say, faux reals. Let's see here. Let's add a video capturing device. I'm going to put me mug on the screen here. Whoa. No, that's not what we're looking for. There's my office. You guys can see my office now. Let me switch. Well, whatever. Here. Why are you doing this to me? No. Okay, this is what happens when you're goofing around in real life, in real time. Okay, bring to front. Move to top. Okay, here we go. So there's my office. You want to see my office? There's my office. All right, so now we're going to zoom in here a little bit. There's Stevie Ray in the background. Best guitar player who ever lived. I don't know why it changed my I don't know why it changed my mug while I was changing the scene, as it were. So let me turn down the desktop audio a little bit so you can hear me yap over the airplane. Okay, so Mike taking shots at Flight Sim 24. All right, so we're gonna do the ILS localizer. We're gonna do the ILS of this approach, and so we briefed it. We briefed it for an hour. Let's see here. All right, we are ready to rumble here. Let's see if I have been flying the ATR. Warrior, please tell me I have the Warrior. Yes, I have the Warrior. All right, cool. Because this is a good plane for me to fly. I'm very familiar with this airplane. So I have a Piper Cherokee in let's get us a good livery here. That's not good. We don't want that at all. That one's Canadian. We want this one over here. No, that's not the one we want. Where's my favorite? Oh, I don't have the this one. This is the one I really like. Is Foxtrot Golf Echo Delta Oscar. All right, so we've got that. Now let's go to KRME and my own is KMRE in Rome, New York. Where? Yeah, this is one thing that is seriously bugged about Flight Sim 24 is you have to zoom in to find your airport. There's Griffiths, and they don't really have it laid out properly, but let's see here. We actually could start it on the runway, and then that way I don't have to mess with everything with startup. Let's do that. Let's do that. We'll go there. Okay, flight conditions. Let's go custom. Now. No. Clouds. Let's go overcast. Let's make it nasty. Let's make it rain. Let's make it. Is this make it 400 feet? Nope. Yeah, I want it negative a zillion. Let's make it 400 feet. No, I don't want it 209 feet. Let's make it 800, which is just at about minimums. I think that's what it. Okay, 826. That's fine with me. Coverage broken. Nah, no. All right, there we go. So, nasty weather. Let's do it. I'm gonna have to see if I can load this approach. All right. So, hopefully we got the moving map coming up, and I'll be able to demo this well enough here. All right, let me get my head thing moving. So hopefully this is going to be low IFR. That's what we're looking for. If it's not, then we can adjust it, because we want it. We want it to be nasty. I want it to be nasty weather. So we're going to see how long this takes to load in. Connection your sim. Yeah, it does. It does. I don't know why that is, but it is. There we go. Let's see what we get for weather here. Oh, yeah, this is nasty weather. Sweet. All right. Let's see here. I gotta remember where all my. Oh, now I'm jazzed. This is gonna be fun. Let's see. Databases are current. Half up, half left. That's correct. That's gonna yell at us here in a second. Where is
TOS system test okay?
All right. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where all my views are set here. All right, so let's get rid of this. Yeah, we want wheel fairings. Oh no, we don't want to get rid of that. Come on. All right, so let's go in here and load the approach. So flight plan KRME. Load procedure. And leave me alone. Load the approach. ILS 33, and this is the GPS that I have in my actual airplane too, by the way. Yeah, we're gonna have direct bolts. We're gonna load the approach. We're not gonna activate it yet. Yep. Now, what is the? Why are you yelling at me? I know. All right. 110.1 is the nav frequency. Let's see here. Yeah. Perfect. There's a 110.1. That's what we want. What else do we want? All right. So we'll fly the hold. Looks like we'll fly the hold, and then we'll fly. And let me see if I can get. See if I can get the chart up here. And then that way you can really see. Okay. So, lights are all good. Let me see if I have. I'm gonna see if I have cockpit lights here. Backlighting. I don't think they have backlighting. All right, we're gonna get going. Oh, look at this. All right, you guys ready? I'm ready. One more thing. Is it? Seems it's not regulated. It's up to us to find. No, you would in this particular case, you would actually be getting you would be getting vectors from air traffic control, or or you'd have a flight plan filed and you'd be following that. So approach. There we go. I don't know which side. I usually have it on this side. All right. Let's do it. Before well, I don't need to tune it, but I want to do it anyway. 327. Is there a bug? There is a bug. Let's bug 327. All right, so here we go. All right, this is gonna be fun. Let's see what we get here. All right, mixture's rich. Fuel pump is on. Trim is set. Flaps are good. Let's do it. Parking brake. Is parking brake off? Probably not. Nope. All right, let's go. This is gonna be. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get in because this is. Look at this. This is the visibility on the runway. Much less finding it. All right, airspeed's alive. Engine instruments in the green. Is the there's 65 knots. Is the audio good or is it too loud? I gotta turn this down just a little bit. All right, for me anyway. Okay. No. Nope. Not doing that. All right, we're gonna climb straight ahead to 3,000 feet. Look at this. No. We're not quite straight ahead, are we? Alright, there's 1,000. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to goof around with this stuff at the same time. Alright, we're gonna climb to 3,500. And I'm not gonna be able to watch the chat, by the way. Oh man, look at this weather. Alright, airspeed's good. Alright. Okay, it's already indicating, which is good. See, I'm a little bit off my heading here, so it's the ILS frequency, which is tuned in, is or the final approach course is I'm to the right of it. All right, so let's start making our turn. There's 2,000 feet. We'll start making a right-hand turn. Good visibility out the cockpit here. And I'm gonna turn to a heading of, let's see, 240, which is right here. Climb to 2, and we're gonna climb to 3,500. So what we're doing is we're basically just gonna fly a big, long traffic pattern. You should want Navigraph. Navigraph is the bomb. Navigraph is fantastic. Yeah, why do you keep sending me messages? I don't want messages. Alright. And if you do fly, there's the city of Utica right there. If you do fly a practice approach like this, they send you on these huge patterns, these huge traffic patterns. So, boy, I haven't flown a 6-pack IFR in quite a while. It's not an excuse, by the way. Fuel pump can come off. Fuel pressure is good. Alright, let's make a left-hand turn here to a heading of about 150. It's always reassuring to see see some ground. I like to hold my, I like to keep my turns at about 20 degrees in IFR conditions, just because it's a nice easy turn. You're not, well, there's 3,500. Power back until you hear a change in engine power. Let's see here. Let's get the nose down. I'm gonna get rid of this yoke here. Oh, no. We're not climbing anymore here, fella. All right. Get back down to 3,500. All right, so let's see here. All right, so we are on our way southbound. I'm gonna get kind of a beam bolts before I turn that way. They're cool. This is like just like a cool old school Cherokee to me. Am I on left tank? I am. Yeah. Alright, so we'll just keep on heading this way. I hope it gives us nasty weather on the way in. It should. So for IFR, you are legal plus or minus 300 feet from your assigned altitude, but you shouldn't be plus or minus 300 feet. You should be on your assigned altitude. Alright, so let's see here. So we need to cross cross Bolts. Outbound 117 for 60 seconds. How am I going to time that? Where is me clock? I guess I'll have Siri do it. And this I don't have. I mean, there is an autopilot, but I don't use autopilot in the. Would you descend while hold to 3,500? I would fly it at 3,500 and just stay at 3,500. You can descend in the hold. That's one reason to use a hold. Like if you're coming in like at 5,000 feet and you need to get down for the approach, you can ask for a hold to lose altitude for sure. I would prefer to plan it a little bit ahead of time. So that I didn't have to do that. So I'm gonna let it lean to the left here a little bit and come back over to 150. And where's the wind coming from? Probably it's got to be at our tail. Alright, now buttonology. Yeah, that's about right. So if you look, I want to fly the hold, to enter the hold at about 117, and direct to Bolts right now is 118. So let's do it. And we're going to turn left to 118. And now the approach should be active. And what I'm looking at is my desired track is 117. And then I'm looking at my actual track right there, which is 112. I just turned through it. So I want to be, I want to get those matched up as best I can. going into the hold. So you can see, whoops, no. You can see right here, we're going to be entering the hold at bolts. You can see direct bolts, 4 nautical mile hold. So that's what we like to see. Try to keep my altitude good here. And this is actually exactly the case that we talked about earlier. When you're basically coming from the wrong direction, you've got to turn yourself around. I'm trying to get that desired track, or that track 112 to match that 117 a little better here, but while not climbing. And the problem that people have is they're trying to maintain a heading and altitude and think about all this stuff, and that's the tricky part of instrument flying, being able to kind of chew gum and walk at the same time. You've got to ignore the weather and just kind of live with it. Yeah, I know you want to keep climbing. I'm not going to let you. All right, what are we? 4 from bolts. Do I have a clock in here? I don't have a clock in here, do I? But it's 4 nautical mile hold. The GPS should count it for me. So what I'll do... adjust the power here a little bit. What I'll do is once I cross bolts, it should give me an indication of the distance. So 4 nautical miles. And when I say a standard rate turn, like so we go outbound 117. Standard rate turn to come back around to the 327 inbound. The little
vertical track.
Talking about a vertical track is fine, chica. Standard rate turn is right on that little bar right there in your turn coordinator. Not too bad thus far. 150 feet high, a couple degrees off on the course. Not too bad. And then let's see here. 1 mile, and because it's GPS, it's not going to be... Yep, see? Look at that. Hold teardrop. I knew that. Well, being a little bit high isn't bad. You don't want to be low in a hold. All right, to 129. I mean, that's sort of the correct heading. One thing that can play with your brain is if you have a slanted cloud, like if there's a cloud that goes like that, you can think you're turning when you're not, and that will mess with you. I've had that happen before. So I'm just going to stay on until it says 4 nautical miles down there. Just because that's the easiest thing to do. There's the thruway. This is like right back to my instrument training days. I did this so many times. This exact approach. And you can see that it's a big hold. I mean, we've got plenty of room. Got 2 more miles here. And the trick is when you're coming back in, when you make your right-hand turn to come around to the inbound heading, the trick is once you get to 45 degrees from your inbound heading, in other words, what is it going to be like 015? if the needle is already coming in, if this needle and that needle are already coming in, then you just keep turning. If those needles are not coming in yet, then you stop your turn, because you don't know exactly where the inbound course is on the first hold leg. So it should be
Vertical track.
yeah, so it's giving me there's 4.2. So okay, so we're gonna go, so right, we're gonna go right hand turn, coordinated right hand standard rate turn, and now we're gonna come around to intercept this course. We're gonna see when that needle starts coming in. I love this weather. This is so much fun. You see, this is the stuff you don't get when you're flying jets. Keep it coming around. Oh, no, keep coming around. See, that needle is not coming in yet. Oh, here it comes. So if you do it right, you'll roll out right with the needle centered. And if you're on a standard rate turn, that's what it should do. So it's not coming in all the way right yet, so we'll just straighten out here for a second. And when you straighten out, you gotta, oh, see, we got a left crosswind. All right. So now what I'm gonna do, see how this was always my trick in instrument flying and instrument training, was that desired track 327. So the needle is off to the left hand side, which means I'm to the right hand, I'm to the right of course, right? Leave me alone. And so what I need to do is my course needs to be left of what my desired track is in order to bring that needle in. And that's what I'm doing right now. That's what I'm talking, Mike, that's what I'm talking about with glass panel. Just makes it so much easier to do all this stuff. All right, we're gonna go fuel pump on, and I'm gonna go notch of flaps once we get the bolts. Okay, now that's coming in. Okay, so let's bring it around here. Now that's coming in. Still not all the way. Nope. Stop. Alright, so now I'm going to come back on the power. We got about 2 miles to go. Come back on the power. We'll go about 2200 RPM. Stop. And I'm going to trim. And once we're a half mile from bolts, I'm going to go first notch of flaps. No. Don't keep dropping power on me here. Alright, so needle is just a hair off.
Vertical track.
I know. 1 minute, huh? Alright, so, boy, I don't know if we're gonna get in here. Alright, so now I want to hold it. Now I want these two numbers, the 327, 327. I want those two numbers to match because I'm right on the extended center line. Alright, half a mile from bolts, I'm gonna go notch of flaps. So we got 0.7, 0.6, nope, 0.5, notch of flaps, and it's basically gonna get you right over the... VLOC. Whoop. See that? When you, all you have to do is just change your view just for 2 seconds. And what I'm gonna do, see, I'm gonna hold right here until I capture the glide slope. I'm not gonna come down and capture. I'm not gonna drop down to 2500 and then capture at Marcy. I'm just gonna hold right here and capture, and then fly it all the way down from wherever I capture. Stop it. Alright. Boy, it's not coming in. Still 5 to Marcy. And the reason I'm going to do that is just because then it just makes it really easy just to stay, keep those needles centered the whole time. And I don't have to start a descent and then start a descent again. Alright, come on now. 4.5 to Marcy. We are crawling. Got a headwind. And what I want now is a reference heading, right? So I know I'm right on that 327, 327. So it looks like it's pretty much a straight in headwind. But you want to get, like, you want to match up. So the needle is centered, 327, 327. Now what's my heading? And that's the heading I want to fly. Because you could be getting wind from the left or from the right. See that glide slope is coming down. I should get it about 3 miles from Marcy, because for every 3 miles you're about 1,000 feet, and we're at 3,500 almost. So it would make sense. No, come on. Alright, now come back to 2,000, next notch of flaps. And now I'm going to start coming down. But see, the power is going to try to drop some more, but I'm not going to let it. I want to descend about 400 feet a minute. And then we'll see what we do. So, correcting back. Now let's come back left a little bit here. No. Alright, needle centered, a little bit below, so we're going to bring in just a tiny bit of power. Every time I look away, I get goofed up. Alright. Little bit of power. Alright, 3,000 for 800. What you do is you start counting down the distance. Or the altitude, rather. 2,900 for 800. You just keep doing it. Trying to correct back to the right here. And the head position gets messed up sometimes too. Nope. Oh, we're getting way right here. Or way left. Alright, 2,800 for 800. Need to get to about 330. 27 for 800. Okay. Fuel pumps on, mixture is rich. Carb heat's cold. Seatbelts are secure. A little bit of power out here. Correcting back to the right. 2,500 at Marcy. And we are going to be 2,500 right at Marcy. Alright, 327, 327. Let's hold that. Alright. Marcy's good. Look at that, right at 2,500 at Marcy. The pain about flying instrument approaches, ILS approaches, is watch how long this takes. I mean, I captured what, probably 2-3 minutes ago. You've got to do this for, I don't know, a while. You know, and it's hard to keep the needles centered for that long. But this is what flying an ILS approach in a GA airplane is like. It's tedious, it's boring, but man, it takes. I'm not looking outside. I'm not gonna get the runway anyway right now. I'm a little bit high, so I pulled some power out. 327, 327. Needle is centered. I wish the weather was worse, because I like terrible weather. We are spot on. That's the Erie Canal right in front of us, but I'm not looking at that. What happens? You get yourself goofed up. If you start looking outside trying to find the runway, you can really mess yourself up. You gotta stay on needles. All right, 2,000 for 800. A hair of power out, correcting back to the right. Oh, why are you giving me this message right now? Just leave me alone. This thing's okay. Correcting back to the right, just a hair. A little bit of power out. Alright. Okay, coming back left a little bit. I'm confident that is going to come down and capture. You know, we're a little bit high, but that's not going to stay that way for long. Correcting back to the right. 17 for 8. Come on. Come on. To the right. See, if I had started looking outside for the runway right now, I'd be in a world of hurt because you'd have to refocus once you realize you're going back into clouds. Right? 15 for 8. Come on, come back right. All I'm doing is paralleling. I'm not coming back. Alright, 14 for 8. We're getting low now, so you gotta start paying attention. Alright. The center of my scan is the artificial horizon right at the beginning, in the middle of the screen. 13 for 8. Alright, now a little bit of power in because I do not want to come down low. Alright. $12 for 8. And now it's when it starts getting more sensitive. Whoopsie, see? Right about 1,000 feet, the airplane stops descending, and that happens in real life. Right here, right at Jerda, it stops descending. It did this all the time to me in real training. 11 for 8. Coming back left. 1,000 for 8.
500.
And this is where you start getting antsy. Nope, 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 nope. 800. Don't have it. But we're gonna do this anyway. See, I got totally goofed up. No. See that right there? I mean, it's a miss for sure, right? But I'm just gonna land it just for the heck of it. No, I'm not. Wow. There's a runway unidentifier lights. Or I'm gonna land right on top of the Pappy, one of the two. Man, I tell you, yeah, that's the Pappy. And this is what happens. See, this is what happens when you try to search for a runway. So what I did right there, don't ever, ever, ever do it. but I just, for the purposes of demoing this, I just didn't feel like going around. But you can start looking for the runway, and you can and that's when you get yourself in trouble. So anyway, but that's right about where most instrument approaches go south, which is real short final on ILS approaches in particular, because it gets really tight, the little cone that you're descending into, and it's tough. It is not easy. And I haven't flown a 6-pack approach in quite a while. That was good practice, but I mean, it was a missed approach for sure, but it was a good time. So that just encourages me to go out and do that a little bit more often. So what do we do here? I don't have VAMSIS or Volanta loaded, so I can't really show you the track. But yeah, we went below glide slope, or below minimums, and that was pretty much that. So anyway, so that's how you do it. And like I said, I mean, ILS approaches in particular, or LPV approaches, LNAV, VNAV, where you've got vertical and lateral guidance, they are tedious, because your final approach, let's say it's 10 nautical miles, it was 12 in this case for final, and I'm trying to hold that needle centered for 90 knots. It's a mile and a half a minute. It's almost 10 minutes. It's like 8 minutes of holding the needle centered. So it's not easy. It takes some effort and focus, but that was fun. So yeah, Peter, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Is when you can fool yourself into thinking you can do what you can't do, right? If you have the 737 fly 95% of the flight, I would like to see a lot of people in a 6-pack Warrior like that trying to fly an ILS approach in bad weather. Most people aren't going to do very well. I did okay right until the end, and I got a little sideways, but that was that. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate everybody sticking around for this long. I mean, we've been 2.5 hours, but Peter, I can't tell you how many people have asked me about X-Plane 12, but I just haven't done it. So, yeah, it's because the needles get more sensitive the closer you get to the runway. So, you can be holding it just fine 10 miles out, but on, half-mile final at 300 feet, and that's when it counts, right? And the ground is right below you, so it's pretty intense. But hopefully, in addition to my semi-marginal flying performance, it wasn't too bad. If that was real life, I would have gone, or if I'd been flying this for real in the sim, like on purpose, I would have absolutely gone missed and just wouldn't have worried about it. I wanted to land it just because we've been going for 2.5 hours. But hey, Brute Pilot, what's going on? That's awesome. Good to see you, man. So I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. Like I said, I was thinking I would get to more charts than this one, but I had an absolute blast. I had a lot of fun yesterday. I hope you guys had a lot of fun today. And now I'm sort of like jazzed to get back into doing some intense GA flying. So like I said, I'm intending on doing 2 of these a week, 2 instrument classes a week. We'll do Wednesdays and Thursdays, and that's what I'm hoping for. So we'll do this again next week. If you want to see the replay or see yesterday's class, go over to IslandSimPilot.com. Everything's over there under Academy. There's a discount for Navigraph in the description, and there's a Patreon link. And really appreciate everybody coming out. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you guys did too. And I will see you at the latest next Wednesday. We'll do our next class. So hope everybody's doing well. Take care, guys. Thank you so much for the company.